Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Here we are, chapter 13. We're up to part 2. We really are moving along. People in life that know I'm doing this project with you, Michael, and welcome, keep saying to me, "Are you nearly there yet? Are you nearly finished?" I'm like, well, we are certainly moving towards the end, but we still have a significant amount of work to do. But
well, yes, Jackie. A warm welcome to you, of course, and to all of our listeners. I hope you've all been keeping well since we last met a week ago. Today's the 27th podcast, Jackie, and we're completing the second part of chapter 13. And as you're saying, it's we outlined at the start that it was going to be a 40 podcast project, and that we're covering the entire work of the Gita in a very summarised, abbreviated form. And so it's going to take 40 weeks. So if this is the 27th, well, according to my mathematical calculations, we've got 13 more to go, which is probably going to run into about Christmas time, Jackie. So
yeah.
maybe the last podcast will be on Christmas Day, and people can finish their lunch and then sit down and listen to us on the last podcast. How
It
would that
really
be?
has quite been an annual project, hasn't it? Like that,
Yeah,
it's like a full year-long commitment, really, from the time we sort of devised and dreamed and planned and
yeah,
got it situated, and here
yeah,
we are. But I have to
yeah.
say, there's a lovely feeling in the momentum that we've got gathering.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of territory, which I'll I touched on a lot last podcast, didn't I, when I introduced or showed again the 3 volumes of Eknath Easwaran's Gita, 6 chapters on the first part, 6 chapters in the middle, and now we're starting chapter 3, or we started last week, chapter 13, which is the concluding 6 chapters. So we're into the last third, if you like. And as you
wonderful.
say,
Well,
these headsets started off last Christmas as a Christmas present. Then it all sort of unfolded, and a few months getting that organised and getting my head around it in particular. So there's 52 weeks in a year, and there's 40 podcasts. So we're it's a year-long project, really.
it is.
All right.
And a
Well,
lovely one at that. So,
a beautiful one. Yeah, I
yes.
would say to everyone, the most rewarding 40 podcasts you're probably ever going to see. So. Great work that you're still with it, and keep up the good work. In the end, of course, it's to everyone's benefit that's doing this work. So I'll continue on, Jackie and listeners.
Please.
So Krishna continues in the second part of chapter 13 to explain to Arjuna the great truth that he needs to know, and that is to go beyond death to immortality and to know the supreme reality, the knower of the field. So one of the quick 3 main questions that a human being eventually asks themselves, Jackie and listeners, is who am I? What's the purpose of life? And what happens when I die? Well, by knowing this material, you'll know who you are. You're both the field and the knower of the field. And what happens when you die is that when you understand all that totally and completely and thoroughly and are living it, well, then you merge with the one. It's all very simple when it's just put into a little 1-sentence equation like that, isn't it, Jackie? All right. So he says, and he uses different names now, just to reiterate what I keep saying, that there's not just one name for God. You can call it God, or if you don't like God, the absolute or the supreme or the Brahman or the divine. So he starts off different little segments saying how to reach him and using the different headings. So the first one he starts off with is the spirit dwells in all creation, in all hands and feet, in their eyes, ears and mouths, in their heads that think. It dwells in all of the worlds. It envelops them all. So your eyes can't see if there's no consciousness behind it. I can't be talking if there's no consciousness behind it. So it's this spirit that's behind everything. Now Brahman is beyond the 3 gunas of Prakriti, yet it is the very consciousness in them. Its subtlety and mystery is incomprehensible to the non-purified mind. So if people aren't doing this work, Jackie, it's never going to make any sense to anyone. Not just in this study, there's other ones that are very good, but any of them need to be studied. You can't do it without the knowledge. This divinity, now called divinity, projects the entire creation from within itself it protects and preserves it, and in the end, it dissolves it. And we looked at that in that last chapter where Arjuna was a bit horrified when he saw that destructive aspect of the Lord. God is the light that lights up all beings and dispels the darkness of ignorance. And so this wisdom about the field and its knower is the only thing that in the end that's worth knowing. Like we need all the knowledge, for life, for your jobs and, all that sort of stuff. But in the essence of truly knowing what a person's meant to know, well, this is the ultimate truth. He says, devoted people who grow to understand this profound, mysterious truth will assuredly enter into me. So there's a huge amount of knowledge and wealth and wealth of understanding in what I've just read out of all these attributes or qualities of the one source, the Supreme Being or Spirit or Brahman or God. Anything you'd like to add in here, Jackie?
Yeah, you've read my mind. There is something I'd like to add. I just was sitting here thinking, I mean, I love that sentiment. I love it when I read it. I love hearing you say it. And I'm hoping that there's a vast proportion of our listeners that even just that sentiment expressed kind of just reinforces a lovely, reason for being and something lovely to seek out further their connection to in life. But as is often my way, I can't help but always relate these teachings back to really practical things that happen in life and ways we can all work, towards this and seek it out. And as you were speaking, I was just remembering that when my children were very small, there was another parent of a set of children that were the same age as my kids. And I would always end up with this parent waiting for the bus or at sport or whatever. And I have to say, without sounding too judgmental, this person in the beginning was highly annoying, like for me anyway, to be on the receiving end of. Just always, the moment you started speaking to them, they just wanted to let you know how fabulous they were. I could have been a famous musician. I could have been this. I'm almost was a world-renowned chef. They just always wanted to tell you how fabulous they were. And it was so annoying. It grated me right down to their absolute, core. But I couldn't get away from this person. We're always waiting for kids in the same place. And over time, I just thought, I have to get past this exterior that this person keeps putting forward, this absolute falsity has got to be part of their protective mechanism. They, possibly feel so small within themselves that they have to assure everyone around them at every available opportunity how fabulous they could have been or that they are. And I just kept thinking, I can't play this game and I can't put up with it for 1 second longer. So I'd let this person exhaust themselves. Every time I caught up, I'd give them 5 or 10 minutes of open conversation. They'd exhaust and remind me how wonderful they were. And then I'd just quietly kind of get in with questions and curiosity. And I always felt like I was getting in around the edges and over the top and underneath. And, eventually over a period of months, I came to touch upon a most beautiful aspect of this person. And in the process, this person obviously could let their guard down a little bit because I'd let them run their course. They probably had nothing else fabulous to tell me about themselves. And somewhere along the line, we just hit on the most beautiful, wonderful conversations. This person was actually quite skilled in a lot of areas. They had some really tangible skills that they offered through their work. And we could touch upon really true, deep, wonderful connection and commentary and things. And that's always stood out in my mind. And so now every time I go anywhere and I come across people that are irritating, I try to just get behind that and think that's part of your projection of who you are in the world. And if we can just get past that in some way, shape, or form and find that divinity within you, and I've never used this language and I never tell people what I'm doing, but this is in essence how I relate to every person in life. I'm always looking at like, what's behind there? Can we just get past the personality? Like, what's underneath? Where's that point that we can really connect with one another in that true way? And it's slightly different perhaps from what you're saying, but in other ways not really. It's I forget the terminology you just used, but it's what you've got putting forward and the divinity that's behind that. So yeah, there's my little pondering and sharing as it relates.
Well, once again, Jackie, you're spot on. And I'll be covering exactly what you're talking about in the material. You've just given it an individual, a story from yourself, and they're extremely important for anyone in the understanding in this material. Personal examples of how it all unfolds. And I'll be referencing exactly because at the last part of this chapter, Krishna runs through Arjuna all the different ways that you can find me. And we start off with the sort of what are the three yogas, the four yogas, the important sort of pathways, yogas being paths. And then it continues on down and down and down. So one of the other ones there will be the one you've just mentioned now. And another one will be that I've got written, J there for Jackie next to it to remind me, is one that you referred to, an example of people that you were aware of a few podcasts ago that were strongly connecting with nature. And you picked up what they were saying to you, that they knew that there was some greater force behind it. So that's exactly all ties in with this material. So what you're describing simply there is that you, Prakriti, a human being, you were using your Purusha, your higher knowledge or awareness, to see that other being, despite its facade that was quite annoying or irritating, that when you looked and probed deeper in, there was that same Purusha, that soul, that spirit in that being. So one of the qualities will be that anyone that can see God even in another human being, to some extent or other, is heading towards the direction of getting to know and understand God better, and eventually unite with it.
It's a
All right.
beautiful practical way, isn't it, that people
Yeah.
can weave this sort of philosophy into their everyday life? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure we all come across people that are annoying or that we don't feel an affinity with. So it's a curiosity as you relate to them in your workplace or in your extended family or in your community, wherever
Yeah.
you brush up against these people, trying to find the goodness and the divinity and connect with that. It's a nice task for life.
Yeah, exactly. And you've just touched another vital point that I've stressed all the way through, and it's worth reiterating once more. That if anyone's just listening to these words and they're just stuck in their head and their words, well, you're missing the entire aspect of the teaching. That's the starting point, a critical and very important starting point, the words and the knowledge. But then the extremely, much more extremely important part is the application of it in our lives, so that we change our lives, where we become different beings. And you're describing something very early in the piece, or many years ago, and looking at it now, because you said, I didn't use those words then, or whatever. Well, the reason you didn't is because you didn't know those words. But since over the years you've learnt more and more of these words, and you can use them then in describing, and better still, understanding for yourself what actually was taking place. If it's not unique, it's not just for you or for the other lady, it's 8 billion people are all doing these sorts of things constantly. And you're just going to say?
I was going to say, I mean, to some degree, though, the words don't matter. I mean, I knew what I was doing at the time, whether I have the words or not. And for those listening, I think as so long as you know what it is you're getting at, terminology or not, I mean, that really is the important part, connecting to someone's truth or essence, as opposed to the facade, the persona,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
falsity that gets put forward.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
lovely.
All right. Well, I'll continue on then, Jackie. So Krishna continues, and he says, know also, Arjuna, that both nature and spirit, and or field and knower, are without beginning. Until now, Jackie and listeners, we've been or I've been describing them as separately, saying that Prakriti comes into existence, has an existence, and then sort of goes out of existence. But Purusha, the consciousness, is always constant. Now Krishna's introducing to Arjuna that there's a subtlety there, and that's not actually a correct statement. he's going to explain now, and I'm just forewarning everyone, or trying to bring a bit of clarity to it before I even start, that they're actually both beginningless and also both endless, nature and the source of the nature. And there's a lovely example at the end of it, which I'm sure will be so simple, it'll make it clear to everyone. So I'm saying until now we've been viewing them separately. That's nature and spirit, or the field and the knower of the field. In other words, creation and beyond the creation, or what brings about the creation. And we're looking now that they're not separate. They're the same thing, but can be viewed separately, or seen separately, or experienced separately. So we've been seeing them separately as Prakriti having a beginning and an end. That's the creation, nature, and Purusha having neither, no beginning and no end. Now Krishna subtly describes how they are both beginningless. He says Purusha, the self, and Prakriti, the creation, are not essentially two different entities. It's like two sides of the same coin. It is a very simple way of saying it. So it's the one coin, but got heads and tails. Well, one coin, you've got Purusha, the higher self, and the other side, you've got the creation, nature, matter. So he says, Purusha, the self, and Prakriti, the creation, are not essentially two different entities. The same reality enjoys two phases of self-assertion and self-expression. This changeless reality, Purusha, puts on the appearance of changefulness and manifestation, Prakriti. So another way of saying what I've just said with the two coins, and there'll be a nicer example of that as we continue on in a short moment. Prakriti, he says, puts on an embodiment of time, space, and causation. It is constituted of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Because of its changeful nature, it's called maya, an illusion. So everything in the creation constantly changing, including our thoughts and our emotions and our age, our physical bodies, our careers, stages of life, everything's constantly changing. And because of that, it's regarded as being not real. The only thing really in the entire story is consciousness itself. No beginning, no end, never changes, always pure, perfect, and complete. So he says that thus Krishna is describing it as having no beginning and therefore no end too. This may sound somewhat confusing and even contradictory, but the great sage Sri Ramakrishna gives a lovely example, simplifying this. He says, as the ocean is sometimes calm and placid, and at other times wild and furious, so Brahman is both actionless and active. When free from action, he's termed Brahman, the reality. When he's active, he's termed Maya, the illusion. So Jackie, you've come down here visiting a lot and you live near the beachside as well. I can go for my walks and I look out at the ocean sometimes, and it's like as still as a mill pond. Beautiful, calm, sun shining on it, lovely blue colour, just perfect. Next day I can go down there and there's enormous waves and there's spray and there's undertow and grey and murky and all sorts of stuff. So it's the same ocean, isn't it? One time it's calm, next time it's active or turbulent or whatever. And we experience that as human beings. We have moments, don't we, when we're at peace. We say, oh, life's like I'm in heaven, I'm in paradise or whatever. And other times we say, oh, gee, life's a hell. Life's hell. It's, and we could be crying and trembling and all sorts of stuff. So it's the same entity, but it experiences both, all right? And those people who meditate, practicing meditation, things like that, learning, we're all trying to learn to be stiller and that. So we're trying to calm our ocean, our own ocean. And I'll mention oceans a little bit more as I go along. So I'll continue on. So that's a lovely example, of the ocean, how Sri Ramakrishna puts it, Jackie. You think all our listeners will pretty much understand all that?
It's an
I'm sure.
excellent example because we can all relate to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So folks, anytime you've lost it, your eyes are bulging and your heart's going 10 times the speed it should be going in that. Well, just remember, hey, I'm a big turbulent raging ocean here. Um, why don't I try and sort of see if I can calm myself down and get rid of some of this turbulence and some of these waves that are crashing backwards and forwards. Because those waves will eventually, if we're out in it, Jack, you can smash us against the rocks and we can drown in it. So we need to be careful, don't we?
Mm.
So the one ocean without beginning can be seen as both calm. So that's when we call it Purusha or spirit or knower of the field or reality or consciousness or God, any of those terms. Or it can be furious. It can be nature, the creation, matter, the field. It's the illusion, everything constantly moving, changing. 1 minute it's this, next minute it's that. All the same, both sides of the one coin, as I said earlier on. So similarly, as human beings, we are like this ocean. We have a dual nature, and I've stressed the dual nature aspect on many occasions. We're both a divine being and a mortal physical human being, and that's the two aspects of the ocean. But both are part of the ocean. So this merging, so when we're calm, we're operating from what's called our higher self. We're using our third eye, our inner vision. Um, um, what I've referred to a few times, Jackie, and one lady in particular was curious. That's Buddhi that I'm talking about here, and we can also be operating from our body aspect, our mind and emotions, and our five senses and our ego. So that's the turbulent side of the ocean aspect of us. So this merging of spirit with matter produces a living human being. The cause of your body is nature, Prakriti, the creator. But the cause of your aliveness, that's your life force, prana, your life force, your experience of being an individual, your feeling joy and sorrow is spiritual. It comes from the higher source. That's what we call the observer or the witness to it all. And you've given a lot of examples over this podcast, Jackie, of your own, where you've stood back and been the observer. And even in that case, one you shared at the beginning, when you're observing this lady and you're finding her irritating and so on, that wasn't you being judgmental. That was you using your higher self, or you were being a bit judgmental in that first instance. But when you let her run the course and then started to look deeper in, that was when you switched over to using your higher self, your witness, your divine aspect. So the supreme self being in both aspects. So that's pretty clear, I think, Jackie, isn't it, to everyone? That the self's in this body, in this mind, emotions, and whatever, all we're doing in this podcast, people listening and so on, everything in our everyday lives is the godly aspect in manifested form. But in there's also a soul, a divine aspect, a spark of the divine. And that's what's behind everything we speak and think and do and so on. And because we've got free will, we can use that force, that pure force, in impure ways. But then that brings about the turbulence and the waves and so on the ocean. When we use the force the way it's meant to be used, for the benefit of ourselves and then the benefit of everyone else around us, including the entire creation, well, then we're in calm waters. All
I
right?
think it's twofold too, isn't it? Like sometimes it's our own choices and actions and decisions in life that will create the turbulence, and other times it feels like a force from the outside coming in. So partly it feels like our role or our job as a human being is to navigate our own self as best we can with as much self-awareness as possible and being of service, and trying to have all of the true and real parts of ourselves activated as we live life, but at times also just trying to deal with the input that comes from the outside world and navigating that. And there's times I think where everybody can probably relate. There's things we can do to calm ourselves down or find steadiness or whatever, but at other times it almost just feels like sort of gritting your teeth and holding on and just waiting for it to pass, waiting for the storm to blow over, and then you just pick the pieces up and keep going in the best way forward
Yeah,
that you can.
yeah. Well, the storm you're talking about, of course, is all the events that happen in our day-to-day lives. Every minute, someone's talking to us, something's happening while we're driving, in the supermarket, at work, in the family, it doesn't matter. But just like the ocean, but there's a reason for it, Jackie. It's not willy-nilly. All those storms that appear before us constantly are to test us as to whether we want to run with the storm, in other words, join in, or ignore the storm and remain a calm ocean. So that's the difficult part of the teaching and the spiritual journey. Like the ocean doesn't just start having waves or whatever. Even in that sense, you've got the moon and the gravity pulling the tides, moving it backwards and forwards. You've got wind that can stir up the surface water. You got things like earthquakes and whatever that send tremors up, and the vibration creates huge tsunamis and things. So that's similar in what you're saying on, as regards humans, but also the same applies even to the ocean itself. But behind everything, Jackie and listeners, is that there's a rhyme and a reason. There's no flukes, there's no coincidences, there's no good luck and bad luck. It's all a perfectly designed plan of consciousness itself. And because it comes from consciousness and consciousness is backing it, it's perfect. But we as having free will, we bring about imperfections in it, Jackie, in the way we think, the way we speak, what's in our emotions, and all driven by desires. The desires are the driving force of all of the movement. And when your desires change from being a turbulent ocean and you want to desire to be a calm ocean, well, then you change within yourself. You think differently, you've got new knowledge, you speak differently, you act differently. So everything's in the end of our own making, and that's called karma. As you sow, so you shall reap. All right? And I think I touched on that very fully the other day when I was talking about the field and fertile soil in this entity of our minds and emotions and that. Whatever seeds we're planting, everyone now we're planting seeds of truth in this program, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. A lot of people listening, they're all wanting to plant seeds of truth. When we finish this and people go on the rest of their day, they might start planting some other seeds that maybe not going to be as useful or beneficial to them. But it's all part of the process. That's how we learn. And that's why we have many life cycles, to get it all sorted out. And now everyone listening to these podcasts, I've mentioned it numerous occasions, is well and truly on their spiritual journey and progressing very, very strongly with a clear, much more clear idea of where they're going and what they're wanting to achieve. Where they're going is to a still ocean. And I'll touch on those oceans right now, Jackie. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the man living in ignorance of who he is has to be born and reborn again and again. But the man whose karma is burnt out by the triple fire, the paths of knowledge, action, and devotion, is not reborn. He enters the absolute, he reaches the end. So there's a huge amount there, Jackie, listeners, but I think I've done a pretty good job clarifying Krishna's deep teachings.
I think for the people that are with us and interested, like their concept is not so difficult to grasp at this point because we've done so much foundational work. I think the challenge for everybody is how we live like this with consistency. And as we've touched on many times, there's moments either in spiritual experience or just in the course of life where everything is smooth and feels like it's going well. And then other times we forget who we are and we get caught into the drama of it all. And there's inconsistencies and we're not congruent. But I think the notion is clear enough. It's how
Yeah,
we apply it in
yeah,
everyday life, how
yeah,
we apply and sort of unfold with this
yeah.
journey.
And again, a very valid comment, and that's most likely, still the remaining part of the work for most people, um, and it's the most important part. So, and these podcasts are doing a number of things, Jackie, for you and the listeners, and for myself as well. Summarising these chapters as briefly as I do or have been doing, it has made me more aware of the nitty gritty of the teachings by looking at it like under a microscope, whereas up until now I've been looking at it more through a telescope or binoculars, if you like, a bigger sort of picture. So it's turned it around a bit for me, and I've been finding it very, very beneficial doing these podcasts, even though it does take a fair amount of time. But I love doing it, and as I say, I'm getting enormous rewards. And the biggest reward, of course, is for what I'm sure people are benefiting from. But yeah, that's the work, Jackie. The practical, the living of it now, and yeah. And what I was going to say is that these podcasts, I think, would be, I know, are very beneficial to everyone in that, it's encouraging everyone, it's reminding everyone each week to stay on the path. It's easy to sort of fall off the path or take detours and deviate. So they're weekly reminders to everyone, maybe a little bit of new knowledge, but if it's not new, well, just more clarity or at a deeper level, of understanding and so on. So there's lots of various ways that these sessions can be of benefit to an individual being.
Mm.
All right, Jackie, I'll have to keep pressing on a little bit.
Yes.
So Krishna completes chapter 13 by, no, I've jumped a page. That's not so good.
Why does that make me nervous with with a certain number of minutes remaining?
Krishna continues. I'll be able to get through this part pretty quickly because, but these relate to the. You'll have to be careful you don't give too many examples here, Jackie. But two of the examples, the one I referred to earlier on when you're talking about people who connected deeply with nature, and you knew that they had a stronger sort of awareness of what was behind it, and the one you've just shared with this lady that you saw that.
I have to clarify, it was a man.
Oh, man.
Neither here nor there.
Sorry, ladies, it was a man.
Yeah.
Krishna continues to further elaborate and expand on this knowledge of the various paths or ways. So we've covered this over all of the chapters so far, all up to chapter 13. So it's a quick sort of summary in a way. So he says the paths always for one to realise the self. He tells Arjuna the path to self-realization begins with karma yoga, which provides man, that's action, of course, which provides man with efficiency in selfless action. This then leads to jnana yoga, which provides knowledge, giving rise to wisdom, which leads to Raja yoga, meditation, which leads to a still strong disciplined mind. So we've gone through all of these in those first 6 chapters, didn't we? Now, in the next 6 chapters, or the last 6 chapters we looked at, that all of those combined then leads to bhakti yoga, the path of yoga, bhakti, which is pure, single-minded love for God through devotion. So that's the strongest, if you like, but they all intermingle and they come in at different We don't just start off, one and then the next and then the next. We get a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit, but that's the order that they really sort of eventually fall into place. So he goes on to say that those who haven't mastered or even heard of these main paths, there are various other ways of realizing the self. And so we list these as follow. So there's people out there, like you're saying, Jackie, with that example of the nature people. They haven't read any books necessarily. They aren't watching these podcasts necessarily or any others, but they've got, they're drawing on their innate higher nature and having some sorts of understandings that will eventually trigger them, that understanding, whether it's nature or this or that, and lead them into these other areas. Is that okay? So he goes on to say that those, so he lists them as follows. So those who diligently and faithfully listening to their spiritual teachers and worshipping the divine as instructed. So there's people then start joining groups. Yeah. And they haven't got much of this knowledge, but that's where they're going to start listening to their spiritual teacher or instructor and get into it more deeply. So they too will then cross the sea of death. Then there's those who are observing changes taking place within us and around us. That is Prakriti, the field, and beginning to sense that there's a greater force behind it, the Purusha, the knower. So this was where I've written your name, Jackie. You referred to the people, earlier in an earlier podcast. So this is the reference to that. And you might remember I said to you they will eventually go into stronger directions. That's a beautiful starting point for them. There's a group of people who see the Supreme Lord in all beings and in all things, in the dying and the undying. He it is who really sees. This is what you were saying, Jackie, with the lady today, or the man, that you could see in him that there was a divine being. Yeah, you have to get past that facade, the mortal facade. Oh, I'm great, and I know this, and now I do this, and all the rest of it. And then you started to see yourself and his self were the same. Very important. They're very important parts of people's spiritual journey. Then there's recognising this. There's those people who recognise the same Lord in all beings and creatures. One is less inclined then to harm yourself or others. So if you realise, if you extended what you saw, what the discussion you were having with that man at a lower sort of level, you would also be saying, well, that person's like me and I wouldn't want to be hurt, so I don't really want to hurt that person. And that's not physical hurt, but also mental hurt and emotional hurt, right? And then there's people who see that all creatures, the nature and animals and everything, although they appear separate, that they can see that they're all part of this creation and have some understanding that the trees, the flowers, the sky, the moon, the ocean, children, dogs, cats, all you've got a likeness for them and an awareness of them. So that they will also, in the end, find the absolute. So all these above mentioned paths, Jackie and listeners, are supplementary and complementary and will eventually lead one to liberation. So it doesn't matter which path you start, they'll all fall into place, and there'll be stronger paths and some not so strong, but it doesn't matter. They all, in some sense, have to be covered. So particularly the devotion part. If you don't love God, you don't love your higher self. Well, you can know it and understand it and talk about it and recite it and all the rest of it, but you won't unite with the Lord. There has to be that divine love flowing very strongly and very freely through the being to achieve that. We've pretty much run out of time, Jackie, but the last part that he mentions to complete the chapter, and people who've got the Gita can look it up themselves, of course. But he's talking what we've covered in many parts of these excuse me, these last 6 chapters on the higher self, just in a sense revising the qualities of Brahma, the spirit, and the same qualities in Atma, our soul. All of those things. Never acts, but and when the part that does act is not affected by the actions. Your higher self, your soul, isn't affected by the fact you've just murdered someone. That's your physical, and the physical and mental and emotional part of the being will have to deal with that. Your soul is like consciousness; it never is tarnished by anything. Yeah, so consciousness is not tarnished by the other side of its coin, where it's manifested by anything that happens in the creation. And our soul is one side of the coin, never tarnished, never affected. The soul doesn't cry. The soul doesn't feel sad. The soul's not impatient. The soul's just pure, perfect, and complete. Yeah, it's the God within us. And I'll just read the last 6 lines where finally Arjuna says, to know that the goal is not to get entangled in the world. He says, know that the goal is not to get entangled in the world, but to use the world to reach divinity. So that's the whole aim. Don't get entangled in this mortal world with everything that's there, as you say, that you just said before, Jackie, constantly bombarding you, tempting you. Do this, say that, come here, let's go there. Yeah, all of this. You can join in some of that. That's all right, but just don't embroil yourself and make that your entire life. Otherwise, you're missing the purpose of what life's all about. So it ends up being a fine balance. We're mortal, so we live in the mortal world, but we're also immortal, and we need to understand. Don't get embroiled. Don't get enmeshed. Don't get entangled. Don't get imprisoned. Don't be in bondage to the world. Yeah. Be free of it. Have your eye of wisdom, your spiritual eye, your divine perception. In other words, buddhi operating, your higher self. To distinguish between the field and the knower. Then you will be able to cut yourself free from the field, free from all the nightmares inherent in Maya's realm of clashing opposites, and your liberated soul can then finally reach me, Jackie and listeners. All right?
Beautiful sentiments to wrap up with. I just was thinking, no wonder when people are on this spiritual journey that they gravitate to others, seeking a similar path, because it can at times be quite an isolating experience, as you live life and you look around and people are enmeshed, as you say. That's a good phrase for it. To seek the company, the fine uplifting company of people who share a similar view or are just exploring different perspective in life. That company, that sense of spiritual community is very important.
Excellent point to finish off on, Jackie. I'll just add 1 or 2 lines to it, as I always do. It's constant reference one way or another about good company. Yeah, be careful of the company you keep. It's that nation of birds of a feather flock together. I would put to you and to all of our listeners that you're changing in who you like to be with and who you don't like to be with. These aren't judgmental things of, whatever. They're just based on truth and observation. You feel comfortable in like-minded people who are wanting to be free of the bondages of the world. And if you stay entangled constantly with groups of people who are wanting to be entangled and are totally entangled in the world, well, it makes it hard to pull away, doesn't it? Yeah. Drug addicts deal with drug addicts and dealers and all of that. People who, like to look after their bodies and are young and have got the energy. You go to gymnasiums or, develop yourself physically. There's people who study and improve their mind and whatever. But there's also other people who watch a lot of rubbish and garbage on TV that sours your mind and gets you locked into all sorts of sort of stuff. So we've got free will as human beings. We can do whatever we like, folk. But as you start tiring of a lot of nonsensical, unconsequential sort of parts of life, you gravitate to finer things. And so eventually people will, like our listeners and us, you go to classes and groups where you study this material, you watch these podcasts, you go on retreats, you go and hear speakers that are renowned, and you buy their books and you read. So you're constantly trying to raise yourself from a mortal to a immortal aspect. It's all there, but it has to be grown, has to be developed, doesn't it? So so that's what we're saying there. But it's called good company. And I'll just give a quick quote from Krishna in one of the Gita, I think it's still to come, where he says, among thousands of men, Jackie, I've mentioned it, I think, in a previous podcast, one perchance looks for me in truth. This is what you're saying. This is what we're just discussing now. And of those, one perchance actually finds me in truth, which means comes to the end of this journey and becomes realized. So Krishna knows that in this day and age, very, very few people are going to be interested in knowing about him, wanting to live their lives according to his teachings, and eventually change their lives to such an extent that they will end up merging with him. So this work, everyone, is not for the faint-hearted. I've said many times, I've congratulated you all listeners. The fact that you're tuning in, the fact that you're listening to these podcasts shows me that you've got enormous courage. You're wanting to fight the battle for your own soul, and you're going to persevere and you're going to keep at it. So well done, keep going, and I'll see you next week.
I'm wondering, you've forgotten homework. Do you have it? Because otherwise,
yeah.
I think we should encourage people to connect with their like-minded spiritual friends and develop and keep and maintain good, harmonious friendships and connections. But what have you got for us?
Well, I'm going to say that I'm going with that one. But
Excellent.
the one I had was while you're connecting with all like-minded people and nice people and people interested in the truth, that's lovely. And you keep looking, everyone, for the truth and whatnot. But your homework, my exercise was going to be, we've been talking a lot about the consciousness is everywhere and that. I was just going to put a challenge to everyone, Jackie, to see, and I'm putting a $10 million reward if someone can come up. Yeah, $10 million.
Why am I nervous?
That's all I've got, Jackie. So I can't raise the stakes any higher.
Oh, gee, always a comedian.
Wish.
For those of you that don't know my father.
Folks, as you're looking around at all the beautiful things in the creation, see if you can find anything in yourself, in anyone around you, in anywhere in the creation, in all the universe that isn't backed by consciousness itself. Yeah, anything that hasn't got consciousness in it, behind it, that's created it or brought it about. And if you can find something, well, let me know, because I've searched far and wide, and I'll give you a $10 prize, a $10 million prize. All right.
Plenty of homework for everyone to carry on with this week. Enjoy your spiritual community, people. Enjoy your personal growth and development. And we are going to see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.